The day I moved in, I carried more than my suitcase. I carried the hope that family still meant something. My hip had betrayed me a few months earlier, and after the surgery my son insisted I stay with them until I could walk without the cane. I thought it was kindness. I didn't see the pity, or the discomfort, behind his words. When I arrived, the house gleamed. Polished floors, designer curtains, candles that smelled too expensive to burn. It didn't feel like home, it felt like a showroom. My daughter-in-law, Sana, stood at the staircase, arms folded, eyes sharp. I smiled. "Thank you for having me, Beta." She didn't smile back. "Of course," she murmured, already glancing toward my son, Asim. "Just until you're better." Her tone sliced through the air, soft, polite but hollow. I tried to ignore it. I told myself she was nervous, that maybe my sudden arrival had disrupted her routine. I'd been a wife once. I knew how a home could feel fragile under someone else's footsteps. So I unpacked quietly in the guest room, careful not to disturb her world. But from the first night I noticed things. The way conversations stopped when I entered a room. The way she wiped the counter twice after I'd touched it. The way my son's eyes flicked between us, unsure which side to take. I kept trying to fit in like an old photo frame no one had room for anymore. One morning I made breakfast, parathas just the way Asim liked as a boy. The smell of butter filled the kitchen. For a brief moment I felt warmth again. Then she walked in. She looked at the frying pan, then at me. "We don't fry food in this house," she said flatly, her manicured fingers snatching the spatula from my hand. "It makes the walls smell." I stood there holding my cane, watching her toss away my food like it was a mistake. "I was just making breakfast for." He cut me off. "I already meal prepped for the week." That word, prepped, made me feel like a stranger in my own kitchen. I left quietly, retreating to my room, heart aching. I told myself not to cry. It was only breakfast. Only words. But the truth is, little things can bruise deeper than blows. By the third week I noticed she had started labeling the shelves. Dinnerware, snacks, guests only. Even the guest towels had a tag. I felt like I was trespassing inside my own son's generosity. Asim kept saying, "She's just organized, Alma." Organized? Oh. This was control dressed in politeness. Every night I'd hear them whispering behind closed doors. Sometimes my name slipped through the air like a secret. "She's too much," she'd say. "It's not working." I wanted to believe my son defended me. I wanted to. Then came the evening that stripped away every illusion. I was in the hallway adjusting the frame of their wedding photo. She looked beautiful in it, radiant, proud. I wanted to remember her that way. Then I heard her voice, sharp as glass, from the living room. "She doesn't belong here, Asim. This is our home. I can't live like this." I froze. The words weren't loud, but they were clear. Each syllable felt like a nail hammered into my chest. There was a long silence. Then finally his voice, low, hesitant. "She just needs time." Time. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My hip throbbed, but it wasn't the pain in my body that hurt. It was the pain in realizing I was now an intruder in the life I'd built for him. That night I sat by the window, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the glass. It was strange, how quickly a mother can disappear inside her own family's comfort. I had come here to heal. But as I listened to their laughter from the other room, muffled and distant, I understood something I hadn't wanted to face. I wasn't part of this home. I was a ghost haunting it. And ghosts, sooner or later, get erased. It's strange how quickly a home can turn into a place you tiptoe through. After that night, after hearing her whisper that I didn't belong, I started walking softer, speaking less and smiling more. It was survival, not politeness. I thought maybe if I stayed out of her way she'd see I meant no harm. But people like Sana don't need a reason to dislike you. They just need space to prove they have control. The first sign was the labels. Every cabinet in the kitchen suddenly wore a strip of white tape, written in her perfect handwriting. Dinner plates. Cutlery. Guests only. Even the sugar jar had a label. As if words could keep me from touching things that were once mine to touch freely. I remember standing there, my hand hovering over a cup, unsure if it was one of the allowed ones. When she walked in, she caught me mid-reach. "Those are for guests," she said, her voice calm but cold. I lowered my hand. "I was just making tea." "I've already made some for Asim and me," she replied, turning to pour her own cup. Then, as an afterthought, There's instant coffee if you want that. Instant coffee. For me. Her tone wasn't cruel, it was worse than that. It was dismissive. Like I wasn't worth the effort of a proper brew. I smiled faintly as if her words hadn't stung. That's fine, I said softly. But inside something wilted. That evening I tried folding laundry to help. She came into the room, glanced at the neatly stacked clothes and said, "Oh, I have a system. Guests don't need to worry about chores." The word, guests again. Like a blade wrapped in sugar. I wanted to scream that I wasn't a guest, that I was a Sim's mother, that I had spent my life building the foundation under his feet. But my voice caught somewhere between my chest and my pride. So I said nothing. Days blurred together after that. Every morning I'd find something moved. My cane relocated, my framed photo shifted, my slippers replaced with ones she'd picked out for me. The house no longer looked like my son's, it looked like hers. Sim barely noticed. He was working longer hours, always tired, always distracted. When I tried to talk to him, he'd sigh and say, "Alma, please don't take things personally. She's just particular. Particular." I wondered if he'd call it that if he saw how she glared when I sat in her favorite armchair, or how she forgot to make enough food for 3. Once I caught her watching me from the hallway mirror. She didn't flinch when I saw her reflection, just smiled faintly like she knew something I didn't. The next day I woke to find my jewelry box missing. When I asked, she said, "Oh, I put it away. The house help might mistake it for trash." Trash. That night I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching my cane. The moonlight cut through the curtains, tracing silver lines across the floor. I wondered when my life had become so small, when my presence had started feeling like clutter. I thought of my husband then, his voice still clear in my mind. "No matter what, your home will always be your strength." But this wasn't my home. Not anymore. It was a stage and I was the prop that didn't fit the decor. A few evenings later I heard laughter from the living room. Her friends were over, sipping tea, complimenting her interior sense. I peeked from the hallway only for her to notice. "Oh," she exclaimed loudly. "Don't mind her, that's a Sim's mom. She's just staying for a little while. Just staying." The words felt like eviction notice wrapped in politeness. When they left, I asked softly, "Did I embarrass you?" She tilted her head. "Of course not," she said. Then after a pause, "But it might be easier if you stayed in your room when we have company. You know how people talk." No, I didn't know how people talked. But I knew how cowards did. The next morning I woke early and walked toward the laundry area. I wanted to wash my shawl, but the space looked different. Cleaner. Emptier. Then I saw them. Boxes. Neatly stacked near the corner. Each one had a label. Storage. My heart pounded as I bent closer. My clothes were folded inside. My saris, my sweaters, even my wedding dupatta sealed in plastic. My life packed away like seasonal clutter. I called out, my voice trembling. "Sanaa." She appeared in the doorway, sipping coffee, looking almost bored. "Oh, I just thought we could make more space," she said casually. "Didn't think you'd mind." For the first time I couldn't speak. Because in that moment I realized it wasn't just space she was clearing. It was me. There's a special kind of pain that comes from being erased from something you built. As I stood in the hallway of that house, the one with my name still written on the deed, I realized the cruelest joke wasn't her arrogance. It was my silence. That house wasn't theirs. It was mine. I had bought it 15 years ago after my husband died. It was supposed to be an investment, a little piece of security for my son's future. I worked overtime, stitched clothes through aching fingers, skipped meals to save for its down payment. Every tile, every window, every brick was paid for with my exhaustion. When Sim married Sanaa, he asked if they could move in just for a while. I said yes, because a mother doesn't count favors when love is involved. I thought they'd treat it like a blessing. Instead they treated it like a stage. Now I watched her redecorate what I once cherished. My floral curtains replaced with minimalist blinds. My carved wooden frames taken down and stored somewhere safe. The home I'd built with my grief was now sterile, her reflection in every surface. I told myself it didn't matter. That I had given it willingly. That letting them make it their own was what family was about. But then she began calling it her house. Whenever guests visited, she'd glide through the rooms with pride. "We renovated this wall," she'd say. "We chose this furniture." She never once said thank you. And my son, he never corrected her. Not once. One afternoon I overheard her on the phone. "Yes, this house is ours now," she laughed. "We got lucky, it's in a great neighborhood." Ours. That word stung more than any insult. It wasn't about money, it was about truth. I could have reminded her. I could have said, "You're living under my roof because I wanted my son to have comfort." But I didn't. I looked at Asim's tired face, his career climbing, his marriage balancing on politeness, and I swallowed my pride. I told myself peace was worth more than pride. But peace feels very expensive when you're the only one paying for it. Every evening I'd hear them laugh in the living room, sharing stories about their plans. A new car. A vacation. Maybe even upgrading to a bigger home someday. My stomach twisted. How easily they spoke of moving on, as if the foundation beneath their feet wasn't built by my sacrifice. One night Asim came to my room. "Amma," he said gently, "Sana wants to host a dinner next weekend. Just family. You'll join us, of course." I smiled. "Of course." He hesitated, his eyes soft. "Just let her handle everything. She's been planning it for weeks." "I understand," I whispered. But I didn't. For the next few days, the house turned into a flurry of preparations. New dishes arrived, flowers filled every vase, and Sana's voice echoed through the halls like she owned them. "No, not there. Put the cutlery here," she instructed the caterers, her phone tucked between shoulder and ear. I stayed in my room, pretending to read, listening to her laughter as she rehearsed her hostess smile. The evening of the dinner I wore my best shawl. The one my husband had gifted me long ago. I wanted to feel like someone again. Guests arrived in glitter and perfume. The dining table shimmered under soft light. Sana glided between them, radiant, charming, performing perfection. I watched her from the corner, unseen but observing everything. At one point a cousin of mine asked, "Sana dear, what a lovely home. Did your mother-in-law decorate this?" Sana's smile didn't falter. "Oh no," she said smoothly. "This is our vision. I designed every corner myself. I'm very particular about aesthetics." My cousin nodded politely. I sat frozen, fingers tightening around my glass of water. My vision blurred with heat, anger, shame, disbelief, all tangled together. I wanted to speak, to correct her, to remind them that the walls they admired had once echoed with my laughter, my prayers, my husband's last breath. But Asim caught my eye from across the table. He looked nervous, pleading even. "Don't ruin this," his gaze said. So I didn't. I smiled faintly, forcing the bitterness down like spoiled medicine. Then as the evening drew on, she stood up for a toast. Her voice rang through the room, bright and clear. "To family," she said, raising her glass. "And to building a home that truly reflects us." Everyone clapped. And then with a laugh that sliced straight through me, she added, "After all, I am the lady of the house." The room echoed with polite laughter. And in that moment, I realized peace was a language only fools like me spoke. It's one thing to feel unwelcome in your own home. It's another to be displayed in it like a forgotten antique. The night of the dinner party, I stood by the living room window, pretending to admire the garden lights while listening to laughter that didn't belong to me. The chandelier shimmered above, the air thick with perfume and expensive wine. The house, my house, had never looked so beautiful or so foreign. Sana had spent the entire week preparing for this. She called it a celebration of new beginnings. New beginnings for whom, I wondered. I had a feeling it didn't include me. Guests began arriving just after sunset. I heard her voice from the foyer, warm and confident. "Welcome. Please come in. Shoes off. This is all marble, you know." She led them through the house like a museum guide, boasting about every detail. Imported tiles from Italy, curtains custom-made, the art piece in the hallway, a gift from my husband. Not one word about who had actually bought the house, who had laid its foundation, who had kept it standing through loss and loneliness. I stayed near the back, quietly refilling water glasses, offering smiles that nobody returned. My son Asim moved through the crowd with polite unease. He looked at me once or twice as if to say, "Please don't make a scene." A scene. That's all I was to them now, something to be avoided. The laughter grew louder. Sana moved from guest to guest, soaking in compliments. "You have such a lovely home," one woman gushed. "Thank you," she said, hand over her heart. It's been such hard work turning this place into something elegant. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. Turning this place into something elegant? When she waved toward the dining table, I noticed the polished wooden chairs, my husband's handiwork. He had carved them by hand decades ago. Each had tiny initials etched under the seat. His mark. Our memory. Now they were props in her little performance. Dinner was served and I helped carry out the dishes, quietly placing plates before guests who didn't even look up. When I tried to set down a bowl, she intercepted me. "Oh, no need, Mama," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You just sit and relax. We'll handle everything." Her friends chuckled. Someone whispered, "She's so lucky to have such a sweet mother-in-law." I smiled, but it felt like my skin was splitting. I sat in the corner, watching her move like a queen in her castle. Every laugh she forced, every compliment she collected, it was like she was rewriting history in front of me. My son sat beside her, quiet, avoiding my eyes. When someone asked how long they'd owned the home, he hesitated, then said, "About 3 years." That was it. 3 years of my silence, and now even the truth had been erased. As dessert time came, I rose instinctively. "I'll bring out the kheer," I said softly, grateful for something to do. Sanaa's head turned, her earrings catching the light. "Oh no, we'll handle it, you just sit, dear." Her voice was sweet but sharp enough to draw blood. Laughter followed again. I heard one guest murmur, "She's adorable." Adorable. Like a well-behaved child. My hands trembled under the tablecloth. I clutched my cane tighter, forcing a smile I no longer felt. Inside, something cracked. As they served dessert, I looked around the table. The fine china, the golden spoons, the glasses sparkling under the lights. Every piece was something I had bought, cherished, saved for. And now not one person in that room knew. The house buzzed with joy, but I felt nothing. Just a dull ache that spread from my chest to my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "You're eating off the plates I starved to buy." But instead I whispered to myself, "Peace, remember? For him." I stood quietly and stepped out into the cool night. The laughter dulled behind the glass door. I walked toward the garden, breathing the heavy scent of jasmine. The air felt different outside, lighter, honest. I could hear faint music from inside, her laughter floating out like smoke. And then I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Good evening." It was Mrs. Qureshi, our old neighbor. Her silver hair glowed under the porch light. She smiled warmly. "I almost didn't recognize you. It's been ages since we spoke." I smiled back, holding my shawl tighter. "Yes, it's been a while." She looked around, admiring the house. "Everything looks so new. I didn't even know you sold this place." The words hit me harder than any insult. Sold. I froze, the smile fading from my face. My throat went dry. I wanted to correct her, to say no, it's still mine. Every inch of it. But the truth stuck in my chest like a secret too heavy to lift. Mrs. Qureshi waited, her expression gentle, unaware that her words had just torn open a wound I'd been pretending didn't exist. I finally managed a faint nod. "Yes," I whispered. "A lot has changed." As she walked away, her perfume lingered in the air, soft, familiar, and unbearably nostalgic. I turned back toward the glowing windows, watching my daughter-in-law laugh inside my home. That was the moment I decided silence wasn't peace. It was surrender. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. Mrs. Qureshi's words, "I didn't know you sold this place," kept echoing through my head like a curse I couldn't shake off. The house was silent now, the laughter gone, the dishes stacked in the sink. From the hallway, I could still smell Sanaa's perfume mixed with the faint trace of roasted meat. It made my stomach turn. I sat in the living room, staring at the walls I had painted myself. The faint cracks in the corners, the dent near the staircase. Each mark was a memory. My late husband had once leaned a ladder there, whistling while fixing the bulb. We had dreamed of this house together. Brick by brick. Sacrifice by sacrifice. No. I was a stranger inside it. When the first light crept through the curtains, I made tea. My hands shook slightly as I poured it into my favorite cup, the one with tiny blue flowers. It had a chip on the rim, but I never threw it away. Like me, it had survived time and neglect. After a long breath, I went to the drawer in my room. Beneath old letters and some folded bills lay a thin brown folder. The deed. My heart pounded as I opened it. There was my name. Farah Ahmed. Bold. Clear. Unchanged. My throat tightened. The house was still mine. Every wall. Every inch. Something inside me shifted, no snapped. It wasn't anger, not really. It was recognition. I had been walking like a ghost, waiting for kindness that would never come. That morning I decided I would remind them who I was. Not with shouting. Not with tears. Quietly. Firmly. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Khalid, my old lawyer. My voice was calm, too calm. Khalid Sahib, I just wanted to confirm the property records are still under my name, I said. He sounded surprised. Of course, madam. Nothing has changed. Would you like me to send a fresh copy? Yes, I whispered. Email it to me. After hanging up, I sat back staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, I felt something that almost resembled control. The sound of footsteps broke my thought. It was Asim. He walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, unaware of the storm sitting across from him. Amy, you didn't sleep? He asked softly. I looked at him, my only son. The boy I'd raised through sickness and struggle, the boy I once promised never to burden. No, I said. I was just remembering things. He nodded absently, scrolling through his phone. Sana said breakfast will be late today. She's tired after the party. Of course she is, I murmured. It must be exhausting pretending to own everything. He frowned slightly but didn't reply. His silence was its own betrayal. When he left for work, I walked through the house slowly, almost ceremonially. My cane tapped softly against the tiles. The dining table still held traces of last night's feast. A half-empty glass, crumbs, a lipstick stain on a napkin. I traced my fingers along the wood, feeling every groove, every scar. My husband's hands had shaped this table. And yet last night I was told to sit quietly. Not anymore. By noon I had printed the new copy of the deed. I slipped it into a transparent folder and placed it on the hallway console, right beneath the framed family photo Sana had displayed so proudly. In that photo she stood in the center, hand on Asim's shoulder, beaming. I was at the far edge, almost cropped out by accident, or design. Now the document sat below it like a silent declaration. A reminder that the walls around them existed because of me. For the rest of the day I didn't speak. I didn't cook. I didn't even turn on the TV. I let the quiet fill the house until it almost hummed. Around evening my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sana. The screen lit up with her usual politeness, a poison wrapped in courtesy. Sana, hi Amy, just wanted to let you know my friends are visiting tomorrow. Please stay out of sight, it's more comfortable for everyone. I read it twice. Then a third time. My hand went cold. Stay out of sight. My own home. The words bled into me like ink in water, spreading fast, staining everything. I placed the phone face down on the table and stared at the folder again, the deed glinting faintly under the lamp's light. That piece of paper wasn't just proof of ownership. It was proof that I still existed. I took a slow breath. Tomorrow she would get her visit. But not the one she was expecting. As I was done hiding. I was never supposed to exist in that living room. At least not according to Sana. The next day arrived heavy with quiet tension. I could feel it from the moment I woke up. The way the air in the house shifted, the way her heels clicked faster than usual across the floor. She had been preparing since morning. I could hear the vacuum cleaner, smell the perfume, the faint spritz of air freshener she only used when guests were expected. Her laughter floated down the hall once or twice, too sweet, too rehearsed. I stayed in my room, sipping tea slowly, watching the clock crawl toward noon. The message she'd sent the night before, please stay out of sight, still burned in my chest. I must have read it a dozen times, wondering when I had become something to be hidden. But today was different. Today the paper on the console reminded me who I was. The deed. My name. My walls. I wasn't moving. By 3 o'clock the doorbell rang. High-pitched voices filled the entryway, followed by the shuffle of expensive shoes and the clatter of laughter. Welcome, come in. Sana chirped. Make yourselves at home. I heard the scraping of chairs, the pop of a soda can, someone saying, Wow, your house is stunning, Sana. I smiled to myself. My house. Then came the footsteps. 4, maybe 5 pairs moving toward the living room. I straightened in my chair. My cane rested beside me, polished and ready like an anchor. When they entered, I turned my head slowly. Sana's friends were young and stylish, their jewelry gleaming under the light. The first one smiled politely at me, probably assuming I was a guest. But when she looked at Sanaa, her expression shifted to confusion. "Who's this?" one of them asked. Sanaa froze. Just for a heartbeat. Then she plastered on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, that's, Asim's mother," she said quickly. "She's just visiting for a few days." Her voice wavered slightly on the word visiting. I stayed quiet, letting her drown in her own performance. They all smiled awkwardly and began to settle. Sanaa busied herself pouring juice, laughing too loudly, acting as if my presence didn't unsettle her every nerve. But I could feel it, the way her shoulders stiffened every time I moved. When one of her friends complimented the artwork behind me, I spoke for the first time. "It's an original," I said softly. "My husband bought it when we built this house." The air in the room froze for a second. Sanaa's hand paused mid-pour. Her friend looked at her, puzzled. "Built this house? I thought you guys bought it recently." Sanaa's jaw tightened. "Oh yes, well, we renovated a lot. You know how old places are." I smiled gently, setting my teacup down. "Not that old. Only 10 years. I still remember when the contractor messed up the wiring in the guest bathroom." Her face paled slightly. I could almost hear her heartbeat from across the room. The conversation stumbled after that. Her friends murmured and exchanged glances. One of them excused herself to take a call. Sanaa turned sharply toward me, her smile gone. "Amy, could you please rest in your room for a bit?" she said under her breath. "We're just talking about private things." I looked at her calmly. "This is my living room, Sanaa. You're welcome to talk privately in yours." Her nostrils flared. For a moment I saw the mask slip completely, the irritation, the embarrassment. She leaned in closer, whispering so only I could hear. "Please. Don't make this uncomfortable." I met her gaze, steady. "It already is." Her friends shifted awkwardly. One of them tried to change the subject, talking about a furniture catalog. But Sanaa couldn't focus anymore. Her smile was forced, her eyes darting toward me again and again, like she was waiting for me to disappear. Finally, after another 5 minutes of strained laughter, she snapped. "Excuse me," she said sharply, standing up. "Can I speak to the owner about her being here?" The room went silent. Her words echoed off the walls, heavy and cruel. Even her friends looked stunned. I stayed seated. "Come." Then I turned my head slowly until our eyes met. "You're already speaking to her," I said. Silence. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Her friends glanced between us, realization dawning in their faces. I saw it happen, the exact moment the truth hit her. The color drained from her cheeks. The fake confidence she wore like perfume vanished, replaced by a raw, stunned disbelief. Her hand trembled slightly as she set down her glass. One of her friends whispered, "Wait, what does she mean?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The folded copy of the deed still sat in the hallway, right where she could see it if she dared to look. Sanaa stared at me, her lips parting in shock, her pride collapsing in slow motion. For once I didn't look away. That silence, sharp, heavy, satisfying, was louder than any victory I could have imagined. And as the moment stretched, I realized something deeper than anger. She hadn't just tried to erase me from my home. She had tried to erase the woman who built everything she now flaunted. I leaned back, breathing slowly, watching the weight of the truth settle around us like dust. Outside, a car honked in the distance. Inside, not a single word followed. The lady of the house stood speechless in front of her guests, her crown slipping, her lies exposed. I could have smiled then, but I didn't. Some victories are quieter when they hurt. The silence after truth is a strange kind of music. It hums quietly, steady, uncomfortable, impossible to ignore. The day after the confrontation, the house felt different. Not quieter, just heavier. The air itself seemed to carry the weight of what had been said. Sanaa barely looked at me that morning. She moved through the kitchen like a shadow, slamming drawers a little too hard, her perfume leaving sharp trails of tension behind her. Asim, on the other hand, couldn't meet my eyes. Every time I caught his gaze, he looked away, pretending to scroll his phone or sip his coffee. It didn't matter. The truth was already out in the open. By noon, I had already called Mr. Collett again. "Are you sure you want to proceed, madam?" he asked gently. "This might escalate." "It's already escalated," I replied. "Bring the papers. I'm done being erased." He sighed but agreed to come by that afternoon. When he arrived, he looked exactly as I remembered him. Neat suit, calm eyes, a man who carried other people's storms without letting them touch him. He shook my hand firmly and placed a neat folder on the dining table. "Everything is ready," he said. "The property records, proof of ownership and the notice of eviction. All legal, all clean." For a moment I just stared at the papers. It felt strange holding something so powerful in such a thin stack. Years of sacrifice, every rupee saved, every sleepless night, summed up in a few official pages. Sana walked in then, holding her phone, clearly surprised to see him. "Who's this?" she asked sharply. "My lawyer," I said. Her eyebrows shot up. "Your lawyer?" Before I could answer, Asim appeared behind her, his expression tight. "Amy, what's going on?" I looked at both of them, the son I'd raised and the woman who'd turned my home into a battlefield. "It's time to clear the air," I said. "Mr. Khalid, please explain." The lawyer opened the folder, his tone calm, professional. "This property belongs solely to Mrs. Farah Ahmed. All documents, taxes and legal ownership remain under her name. You two have been residing here as guests without any official rental agreement." Sana blinked rapidly, color draining from her face again. "That can't be right," she stammered. "Asim told me, he said this house was ours." I turned to my son. "Did you?" He swallowed hard, eyes darting between us. "I didn't mean to lie, Amy. I just thought it would make things easier." "Easier?" I repeated softly. "You let her humiliate me in my own house. You let her treat me like a burden, all while knowing the truth." He opened his mouth but no words came. Sana meanwhile was pacing now, her voice rising. "This is ridiculous. We've lived here for years. We've invested in this place, painted, furnished, improved." "On my dime," I cut in. "Every nail, every curtain, every so-called improvement was paid for with my money." Mr. Khalid cleared his throat and slid another paper across the table. "This is a 30-day notice to vacate, effective immediately. It's standard procedure, but given the circumstances, Mrs. Ahmed is being generous." Sana snatched the paper, scanning it frantically. Her hands shook. "You can't do this," she hissed. "You can't just kick us out." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of years lift from my shoulders. "I can," I said quietly. "And I am." Asim's eyes filled with something I couldn't name. Guilt, maybe shame. But not enough of either. "Amy, please," he said, his voice trembling. "Let's talk about this calmly. Don't make a scene." "A scene?" I echoed. "You think this is a scene? This is me reclaiming what I built while you both tried to erase me from it." My voice didn't shake this time. For years, I had spoken gently, carefully, afraid of hurting feelings or disturbing peace. But peace built on humiliation isn't peace, it's surrender. And I had surrendered long enough. Sana's phone buzzed on the table but she ignored it. She was staring at me now, fury rising through her disbelief. "You think this makes you powerful?" she spat. "You think you can just throw us out like trash?" I stood up slowly, using my cane for balance. "No, Sana. I think I can remind you what respect feels like." Her lips parted, ready to bite back, but the words didn't come. She just glared, trembling, torn between pride and panic. Mr. Khalid gathered his papers, bowed slightly and said, "You have until the end of the month to make arrangements. After that, we proceed legally." He left the room, the front door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was thick and electric. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, each second louder than the last. Sana turned toward me, eyes blazing. "You can't do this," she shouted. Her voice cracked halfway through, a mix of rage and disbelief. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because deep down she already knew. It had. The day they left, it rained. Not a soft drizzle, but a cleansing, furious downpour that drummed against the windows like applause from the heavens. Boxes lined the hallway, stacked unevenly, filled in a rush. The air was thick with tension and the faint scent of perfume and dust. Sana's footsteps were sharp, angry, echoing through the house as if she wanted the walls themselves to feel her resentment. "Asim, hurry up," she barked. "I want to be out of here before she changes her mind." I stood in the living room doorway, my cane steady beneath my palm. I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't have any, but because for the first time in years I didn't need to explain myself. They avoided looking at me as they moved past, dragging suitcases that scraped the floor. Every thud sounded like an apology left unsaid. When the last box disappeared through the front door, I exhaled slowly. My knees trembled not from weakness, but from the sheer relief of taking my home back. Once the car engine faded down the street, I closed the door and leaned against it. The silence that followed wasn't the heavy, suffocating kind I'd grown used to. It was open. The kind that breathes. For a long moment I just stood there, letting the quiet seep into my bones. No clattering dishes, no cold stares, no whispered mockery from the next room. Just rain and me. That afternoon I called a locksmith. A young man arrived, polite, efficient, maybe 25 at most. "Replacing all the locks?" he asked. "Yes," I said firmly. "Every single one." He nodded and got to work, tools clicking rhythmically. The sound was oddly satisfying, like punctuation marks at the end of a long, bitter chapter. When he was done, he handed me a small set of new brass keys. They gleamed softly under the hallway light. I turned them over in my hand, the cool metal pressing into my skin. They weren't just keys, they were proof. Proof that the house finally belonged to me again. I paid him, locked the door behind him, and stood for a moment, gripping the handle. Then, almost impulsively, I turned the key, hearing the soft click of the new lock sliding into place. That sound, it wasn't just mechanical. It was spiritual. Final. I walked through each room slowly, reclaiming them one by one. The living room still held traces of their presence. A cushion out of place, a faint perfume on the curtains. I opened all the windows, letting the wind sweep through, chasing away the ghosts. In the kitchen, I set a pot of water to boil. The hiss of the flame was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in months. I reached for my old teacup, the one Sanaa had hidden once, saying it was too chipped to be displayed. I smiled as I poured hot tea into it, watching the steam rise in delicate curls. This was my ritual. My peace. For the first time in what felt like years, I sat at the table and drank without flinching, without feeling like I was trespassing in my own home. The tea tasted like victory. Not the loud, triumphant kind, but the quiet, earned kind. The one that follows endurance. Evening settled softly, painting the rooms in shades of amber and blue. The rain had stopped. The house breathed again. I wandered out onto the porch, inhaling the cool, damp air. The ground smelled of earth and endings. That's when I saw it, an envelope, damp from the rain, resting neatly against the door. I bent down slowly, picked it up, and wiped off the drops. The handwriting was unmistakable. My son's. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The words were short, jagged, almost desperate. "You'll regret this, Mom." I stared at the words until they blurred. The rain began again, faint and steady. "Regret? Oh." I closed the door behind me, locked it once more, and whispered to the empty house. "Not this time." The silence that once felt peaceful began to ache. It crawled into the corners of every room, whispering memories I didn't want to hear. At night, the house seemed too big. Every creak felt like a voice calling from the past. I'd turn over in bed and stare at the ceiling, counting the faint flicker of streetlights through the curtains. That's when the thoughts would come, sharp, heavy, uninvited. Had I gone too far? During the day, I kept myself busy, polishing furniture that didn't need polishing, tending to plants that didn't need tending. Anything to keep from thinking about the empty hallway where my son's laughter used to echo. He'd always laughed with his whole body, like the world couldn't hurt him. I used to love that about him. Now I wondered if that same careless joy had made him blind, to my pain, to my place in this home. Sometimes I'd stand at the window and imagine them somewhere new, unpacking, decorating, maybe laughing at how I finally lost it. The thought stung more than I expected. I made tea again that evening. The steam rose and I watched it twist upward like a fragile ghost. For a moment I caught myself pouring a second cup. A habit. For him. I froze, the liquid nearly spilling over the rim. Then I set the cup down gently and whispered to no one, "You're not here anymore." The truth sat heavy in my chest. I had my house back, yes, but I'd lost something bigger. Something you can't measure on paper or in deeds. Regret is strange. It doesn't come all at once. It seeps. It came to me in little moments. When I found his old slippers near the back door. When I caught sight of the dent on the wall from when he first moved the furniture. When I saw the faded photo of him holding his daughter in the garden. That smile. That warmth. I'd told myself he'd chosen his wife over me. Maybe he had. But I couldn't forget that before all of this he'd been my boy. The one who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after dinner. The one who called every day when he first got married. When did that change? When did I stop being home and start being a burden? I tried to push those thoughts away. I reminded myself of the humiliation, the way Sanaa had spoken to me, the way he'd stood there, silent. I remembered how easily they'd turn my kindness into convenience. And still, some part of me whispered you could have handled it differently. I hated that voice. It made me feel weak. Because maybe I was harsh. Maybe I had drawn a line too late, too sharp. But how many times can a person forgive before they disappear completely? The nights grew colder after that. The house held on to every sound, every sigh, every restless movement. Sometimes I caught myself waiting for the sound of the gate opening, for his car pulling in, for that familiar call of, "Amy, I brought something for you." But the gate stayed shut. And I stayed alone with my thoughts. One evening as I was folding laundry in the living room, the phone rang. The sound startled me. It had been days since anyone called. I picked it up slowly, half expecting it to be a wrong number. But when I heard her voice, I froze. "Amy," Sanaa said softly. Her tone wasn't sharp this time. It was careful, almost rehearsed. I didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing on the other end, waiting. "I think we should talk," she finally said. "Just talk." The line went quiet after that, her words hanging between us like a fragile thread. I stared at the phone long after she'd hung up, my heart pounding in that familiar mix of anger and longing. But after everything, still a part of me, small, foolish, desperate, wanted to believe maybe she meant it. Maybe she wanted peace. Or maybe she wanted something else entirely. The silence hurts more than her words ever did. Strange, how quiet can scream louder than any insult. Since they left, the house feels heavier. The air doesn't move the same. Every step I take echoes like an accusation. This place used to feel alive, full of chatter, smells of food, laughter. Now it's just me. Just me and the sound of regret settling into the walls. At first I told myself I didn't miss them. That I enjoyed the peace. That it was their loss, not mine. But each night that lie grew thinner. I'd catch myself glancing at the gate, listening for the faint sound of his car pulling up, the scrape of keys, the familiar "Amy," that never came. I'd set 2 cups on the counter when making tea, then quietly put one back. I hated myself for that. For still hoping. Because I had every right to be angry. Every right to feel betrayed. I tried to fill the space they left behind. Rearranged furniture. Repainted the walls. Even bought new curtains, soft beige ones that caught the morning light. But no amount of paint could cover what I felt. Every corner whispered memories. The spot where he fixed my old chair. The hallway where he once surprised me with flowers on Mother's Day. I thought I'd built walls of pride around me. But they were paper thin. One memory, one photograph, and it all crumbled. Sometimes I wonder if I overreacted. If I should have let it go. If maybe her cruelty came from insecurity, not hatred. Then I remember the look in her eyes, that cold, mocking satisfaction when she told me to stay out of sight. No, it wasn't insecurity. It was power. And he let her have it. He stood by and watched his mother be erased from her own home. That's what I can't forgive. Not yet. The neighbors still ask about them sometimes. I smile and say, they're doing fine. It's easier than explaining the truth. But once a woman at the market said, "You must be lonely now that your son's gone." I laughed. It came out hollow. "I've been lonely for a long time," I told her. And that night those words kept replaying in my head. Because they were true long before he left. I started writing again, small things. Notes, recipes, bits of thoughts on paper. My handwriting looks older, shakier. Maybe I'm just trying to convince myself that I still have something to hold on to. Sometimes I write letters to him that I'll never send. I tell him about the garden, about the weather, about how I wish things had gone differently. I sign them, "Love, Amy," and fold them neatly into a drawer. It's foolish, I know. But it feels like talking to the son I lost long before he moved out. Then came tonight. The phone rang just as I was turning off the lights. For a second I thought I was dreaming. The sound felt so foreign now. When I picked it up there was silence on the other end. I almost hung up. Then a voice spoke, soft but clear. "Amy, it's me. Sanaa." My heart stuttered. For a moment I didn't know what to say. "I think we should talk," she said after a pause. "There are things we need to clear up." Her tone wasn't sharp like before. It was measured, careful. The kind of voice someone uses when they want something. I didn't answer. Not right away. Part of me wanted to hang up. Another part, the foolish, aching part, wanted to listen. She exhaled softly. Tomorrow evening. Please. Then the line went dead. I stood there in the dark, the dial tone humming in my ear, my hand trembling. That's what she said. But with her, talk never meant peace. And deep down I knew, this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of something I wasn't ready for. She arrived wearing white. The color of peace, of apology, or maybe of performance. Either way, it didn't suit her. The doorbell rang just after sunset. I knew it would be her. I'd been expecting this visit since the night she called. When I opened the door, she was standing there beside my son, eyes lowered, hands clutching a gift basket too perfect to be sincere. "Amy," she began softly, "can we come in?" I nodded. I wasn't cruel. Not yet. We sat in the living room. The same room where weeks ago she demanded to speak to the owner. Now she looked smaller somehow, her voice trembling, her words coated with sweetness that felt sticky, false. "I just wanted to say, I didn't mean to disrespect you," she said. "Things got out of hand." I studied her face. Not a hint of true remorse. Just calculation. My son sat beside her, looking like a man caught between duty and guilt. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I poured tea for all three of us. The silence was thick. When she reached for the cup, her hands were shaking, not from guilt but from fear. She smiled again, the kind of smile people wear when they're about to ask for something. "I've been handling some paperwork," she began carefully. "Taxes, property registrations, you know how complicated these things can get." I said nothing. Just sipped my tea. She continued, "And well, since you're getting older, we thought maybe it's better to put the house under my name. Temporarily, of course. Just to avoid legal confusion later." My son finally looked up. "It's just for safety, Amy," he added. "You'll still live here. Nothing changes." I set the teacup down slowly. The sound of porcelain meeting glass was the only sound in the room. That was her mistake. She thought I was still the quiet woman who'd let her box up my clothes, erase my name, and call me a guest in my own house. But silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it means preparation. I stood up and walked to the small cabinet near the wall. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a thin brown envelope. The paper inside was crisp, new. "I actually handled some paperwork myself," I said, placing it on the table. Her eyes flicked to it, curiosity turning to tension. I let her open it. Slowly. Carefully. Inside was the new deed. Signed. Stamped. Finalized. The house, the one she called hers, was no longer in my name either. "I don't understand," she whispered. I leaned forward. "I donated it," I said softly, "to a women's shelter downtown. The deed's already transferred. They'll move in next month." Her face drained of color. My son's mouth fell open. You what?" he stammered. "I gave it away," I repeated. "To women who need a roof more than people who only saw me as a burden." For a moment the only sound was the clock ticking behind us. Then came the trembling anger in her voice. "You can't do that. You had no right." "Oh, I had every right," I said quietly. "It was mine to give. Mine to protect. And now it's out of your reach." My son stood up, his face torn between disbelief and shame. "Amy, please. This isn't fair." "Fair?" I repeated, meeting his eyes. "Was it fair when you let her humiliate me? When you let her call me a guest under my own roof?" He didn't answer. Tears welled in his eyes, but they came too late. Too late to undo the damage, too late to earn forgiveness. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The evening air was cold, sharp. The sound of the gate creaked through the silence. "Go home," I said softly. "Wherever that is for you now." They hesitated, unsure if this was real. Then I stepped aside. As they crossed the threshold, I whispered, "Now you can speak to the new owner." Her head snapped around, her eyes wide. But I didn't wait for her reply. I closed the gate, slowly, firmly, between us. And for the first time in years, the sound of it locking didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom.